Have you ever noticed how your elderly relatives slowly start to change? These changes often seem like ordinary signs of aging, but sometimes they hint at deeper processes underway. Research shows that the body begins sending subtle signals long before the final stages, sometimes a year or even more in advance. The ancient Romans believed that aging crept in on silent footsteps, while Buddhist monks compared the fading of life to a slow and graceful sunset. Modern science supports the idea that our bodies do, in fact, warn us, though many people overlook these signs until it's too late. One of the most visible warnings is unexplained weight loss. It may seem insignificant at first. However, when someone begins losing weight without any diet or effort, it becomes a cause for concern. The body may be struggling to absorb nutrients, muscle mass declines, and even once enjoyable meals no longer bring satisfaction. It's not merely about eating less. It signals that the aging body is preparing for the final stretch by reducing its energy needs. Another significant sign is a noticeable change in appetite. Older individuals often eat less, not out of pickiness, but because their taste buds and digestion no longer function as they once did. Studies from the London Center for Aging Research reveal that during the last months of life, many people naturally lose interest in food. And this is a physiological, not psychological process. But there are more subtle signs too. For example, increasing fatigue, where even simple daily activities become overwhelming, or emotional changes. Some people become more withdrawn, while others grow unusually tender and sentimental. None of these signs are random. They are part of a natural process. The key is not to panic, but to understand. If you recognize these changes early, you can help your loved one live their remaining time with greater comfort, dignity, and care. After all, as ancient wisdom teaches, old age is not just a time of fading. It is a time of profound insight. Have you ever seen an elderly person suddenly lose a significant amount of weight? It's not always just a part of aging. Ancient Roman physicians once observed that sudden, unexplained weight loss was often one of the earliest signs of serious internal changes. Modern research confirms that conditions like heart failure, kidney disease, or cognitive decline can alter the way the body processes nutrients. Interestingly, Buddhist monks noted centuries ago that as life draws to a close, the body itself gradually lets go of the need for food. It is not an act of stubbornness. It is a natural transition. Scientists today explain this phenomenon through changes in metabolism and hormonal signaling. Rather than trying to force an aging person to eat, it's far more important to offer comfort, provide light, easy-to-digest meals, and maintain a gentle approach to nutrition. And how often have you noticed an elderly relative constantly complaining of exhaustion? This isn't the kind of tiredness that disappears after a nap. The ancient Greeks described it as the dimming of life's flame. Today, modern medicine explains it more precisely. As the organs begin to slow down, the body shifts its limited energy resources to preserve only the most critical functions. The heart struggles more to pump blood, muscles receive less oxygen, and this results in a deep, persistent fatigue. It's remarkable, but Avicenna also wrote in his works that as death approaches, a person often begins to sleep more. This isn't laziness, it's the body's way of conserving energy. Sometimes there are sudden shifts. A person may seem lively and energetic one moment, and then completely drained the next. The hardest part is the emotional impact. Imagine what it feels like to realize you can no longer do even the simplest tasks that once came easily. These changes are not a cause for panic, but a clear signal that care and support need to be approached differently. It's crucial not to push or demand activity, but to offer support and help preserve dignity during this final stage. As the Tibetan Lama said, the last chapter of life is like an autumn leaf, no longer as vibrant as in summer, but in its fading there's profound wisdom and quiet beauty. This brings us to the story of Margaret Thompson. How a factory worker overcame illness and hardship. Margaret Thompson worked at a dairy plant in Lincoln for 35 years. Having started there as an 18-year-old right after high school. The whole town knew the special cheese she helped create, and the factory even earned awards for it. But in her final 2 years, everything began to change. At first, she noticed a troubling loss of strength. By midday, her hands would tremble, and by the end of the shift, Her legs could barely hold her up. Her coworkers would whisper behind her back, "Grandma Margaret, it's time to retire." But she brushed it off. She needed to support her single daughter and grandson. Then something happened that she found too painful to speak of. She started losing weight rapidly. Her once perfectly fitting white uniform now hung loosely on her frame. The shift supervisor, a blunt man in his 50s, poked fun at her. "What's going on, Margaret? Trying out for a modeling job? Or are you sick?" She would laugh it off, cinching her belt tighter and joking, "Just testing out a new technique, Petrov, for easier movement." But the humor faded when she could no longer lift a 10-liter bucket. Her hands shook uncontrollably, and the precious product spilled across the floor. From that day forward, her workplace became unbearable. Young workers she had once trained now laughed behind her back, whispering, "There goes the skeleton in the lab coat." Someone put ice in her shoes. Someone else hid her uniform. One day, when Margaret sat down near the conveyor belt just to catch her breath, the supervisor erupted. "I don't want this anymore. Fire her. We're not running a retirement home." That evening, Margaret cried through the night. But by morning, she had made a decision. She would fight back. A random health newspaper she found at the local clinic offered unexpected hope. It explained that sudden weight loss and weakness weren't just normal aging, but signs of underlying health issues. For the first time in years, Margaret, usually skeptical of doctors, made an appointment with a physician. The examination revealed severe anemia and early signs of thyroid dysfunction. "If you had waited 6 more months, you might have ended up in the hospital," the doctor said, shaking his head. The treatment didn't yield immediate results, but Margaret remembered the advice she had read. Instead of forcing herself to perform at her old pace, she began to conserve her energy and adapt to her new limitations. She adjusted her diet carefully, always carrying nuts and dried fruits with her, and started drinking special vitamin smoothies, a recipe she had found in a local newspaper. Whenever she felt completely drained, she didn't hesitate to sit down, do some breathing exercises she had learned from a nurse at the clinic. Then, something unexpected happened. When her supervisor once again started shouting, calling her a burden, Mary Thompson calmly responded, "Mr. Peter Johnson, I have a medical certificate. If you wish, I can apply for disability, but then you'll have to explain to the labor inspectors why the company is violating employment regulations." The workshop fell into stunned silence. No one expected such firmness from patient, quiet Mary. A month later, she was reassigned to lighter duties, overseeing the quality control of packaging. Her colleagues, seeing her newfound calm and confidence, gradually stopped mocking her. And when the factory received an urgent order for their signature cheese, destined for delivery to Boston, and the younger workers were at a loss, it was Mary Thompson, no longer working at the heavy boilers, who quietly stepped in and reminded them of an old trick, adding a touch of cream to the spiced jam for better texture. Today, she continues to work, even though she is officially retired. She often says that the key is not letting illness break you and learning to listen when your body starts shouting for help. As for her outlook on people, she now has a favorite saying: "Cheese, like people, comes in many types. Some turn sour with bitterness, others, like good-aged cheddar, only grow stronger over time." Have you ever noticed how fiercely independent older people sometimes begin to withdraw from activities they once enjoyed? It's not laziness or stubbornness. The ancient Greeks called it self-care, and modern psychologists explain that as physical strength declines, the body instinctively switches to energy conservation mode. Imagine realizing one day that you can no longer do the tasks that once came easily. It's not that the person doesn't want to engage. Even holding a conversation may suddenly require immense effort. Buddhist monks often compare this stage to an autumn leaf barely clinging to the branch. Studies show that during the final months of life, the brain operates differently. Even ancient Roman physicians documented how the thoughts of elderly individuals often seemed muddled. Today, we understand that reduced blood circulation is a major factor. The brain, deprived of enough oxygen, begins to feel as if it's submerged in fog. A person might forget names, lose their train of thought, and then, unexpectedly, regain clarity for a moment. Emotional shifts are just as real. Some elders become irritable, overwhelmed by sensory input. Others withdraw into a quiet, reflective state. This doesn't mean they love their family any less. It's simply that they now find more peace within their own inner world. So what should you do? Don't try to force cheerfulness or stimulation. It will only exhaust them. Wise people suggest simply being there, without demands, without criticism, creating a quiet, warm space around them. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can offer is a calm place where they know they are loved and understood. And if you notice that your loved one is increasingly losing track of conversations or feeling disoriented in familiar places, don't just dismiss it as normal aging. It may signal deeper changes that need understanding and care. Perhaps the body is trying to send important signals, and in such moments, what matters most is not medication, but patience, not words, but quiet presence. As the ancients said, the final days of life should be like a sunset, a peaceful and dignified completion of a long journey. Have you ever noticed how an elderly person can suddenly seem to change? It's not a whim, nor a worsening of their character. Ancient Greek philosophers referred to this as the twilight of reason, while modern neuroscientists explain it differently. As the body weakens, the brain's functioning changes. A person might no longer recognize close family or respond to jokes they once found amusing. It's as if a soft light inside them is gradually dimming, first in one room, then another. Buddhist monks describe this as a river slowly merging into the ocean. The water remains the same, but the current grows gentler. It's important to realize that your loved one is not doing this intentionally. Their brain is simply processing information differently now. At such times, it's better not to insist on conversation, but simply stay close. Speak softly, hold their hand, create a calm, reassuring environment. Even if it seems like they can't hear you, research shows that deep down they still feel your presence. Now picture your grandfather, who once could walk through winter storms without flinching, now catching every minor cold, or a small cut that used to heal in 3 days, now lingering for weeks. This isn't just aging, it's a signal that the body's defense systems are faltering. Ancient Roman physicians were the first to describe this phenomenon. They said that as the body ages, it becomes deprived of its vital fluids. Modern science explains it through slower circulation and a weakened immune response. Immune cells can no longer reach trouble spots in time. A particularly concerning sign is when standard antibiotics stop working, or when fever fails to spike during infection, which it normally would in youth. This indicates that the body can no longer fight illness as it once did. Even a simple cold can now become dangerous. But there's good news. Knowing these changes allows us to better care for our loved ones. Pay attention to even minor wounds. Change bed linens regularly. Air out the room frequently. As Tibetan lamas taught, when the body weakens, it needs less medicine and more attention. The key is not to panic over every cough, but also not to ignore concerning signs. Even in such a fragile state, a person deserves comfort and proper care. Remember what old families in England used to say: old age is not a burden when there are loving hands nearby. Have you ever noticed how sometimes an elderly person becomes suddenly listless and withdrawn, even without clear symptoms of illness? This can be an early sign that the body is quietly fighting an infection. The ancient Greeks called it the silent fading, when the body no longer reacts strongly to disease as it did in youth. When an elder starts falling ill more often, families often push for aggressive new treatments. But the wisdom of Tibetan monks reminds us that when a river changes course, it's better to gently guide it rather than dig a deeper channel. Sometimes, it's not more antibiotics that are needed, but simple things: clean clothes, plenty of fluids, and minimal stress. What should truly draw attention is any noticeable change in breathing patterns. You might notice that your grandmother or grandfather begins breathing irregularly, shallow breaths, long pauses. Ancient Roman doctors referred to it as the breath of fading life. Modern medicine explains that as the heart weakens, the body redirects oxygen to only the most vital organs, leaving the extremities cold and sometimes bluish in color. This isn't because the room is cold, it's because the blood no longer reaches the limbs effectively. Some people struggle to breathe even after speaking just a few words. In such moments, it's important not to panic. Instead, make the person comfortable. Elevate the head of the bed, offer a warm, not hot drink, and air out the room to ease breathing. As was said in old times, when life is setting like the sun, the best thing we can do is not to interfere, but to stay close and finish the journey quietly and with dignity. The focus during this period should not be heroic medical interventions, but simple presence. Hold their hand, speak gently, expect no answers, because even when words are no longer needed, the warmth of human touch and a peaceful atmosphere offer more healing than any medicine. As was once said in old English villages, old age is not something to be cured but to be honored, like the final ray of a setting sun. Such careful attention becomes the greatest gift we can give during the final days of a loved one's life.